First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I love that macho music. It's Bev Turner tonight, not Laurence Fox. It is 7 o'clock. I am here for the next hour. First up, the digital age is well and truly upon us. Is it all moving too fast and in the wrong direction? Technology is meant to be making things cheaper and more convenient, but is that what you're experiencing? I'm not. Aldi have opened a store without tills or cashiers. A video has gone viral. Keep watching to see why. What does it all mean as well for the skills, the jobs we need? Where do they go? And then, how long after waking up do you feel that you're told what to do and what's not to do? Walk up the stairs, don't eat nuts if you've got an allergy, drink water if you're hot. We are infantilising society, aren't we, by stating the obvious? We're also, of course, going to be discussing the quick exit of MP for Mid-Bedfordshire, Nadine Dorries. It wouldn't normally be that interesting, but at 10 o'clock this morning, she said she wouldn't dream of triggering a by-election in her area after being knocked back in Johnson's honours list. By 2 o'clock, she'd changed her mind. We're going to be discussing all of that and more with Lewis Oakley, co-host of the Bisexual Brunch podcast, and Connor Tomlinson, writer and podcaster. Most importantly, of course, I want to hear from you. Send your views my way. gbviews@gbnews.com. All coming up after headlines with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Bev. Good evening. Our top story this hour. Boris Johnson's resignation honours list has been published, and on it are close allies of the former Prime Minister. Priti Patel, the former Home Secretary, receives a damehood. Former Business Secretary and GB News presenter Jacob Rees-Mogg receives a knighthood. Sean Bailey, a London Assembly member and former mayoral candidate, has been handed a peerage and will now sit in the House of Lords. Conservative MPs Conor Burns and Michael Fabricant also received knighthoods. Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner has criticised the list, calling it a sickening insult. However, Jacob Rees-Mogg has told GB News that it is an opportunity for an outgoing PM to show their appreciation.
Outgoing Prime Minister has done a great service to the country, whether you agree with his politics or not. Being Prime Minister is a very important role, it's a very hard-working role, and that for a Prime Minister to be able to say thank you to those people who have helped make his job a little bit easier is, I think, perfectly reasonable.
Well, those not on the list include former Minister Nadine Dorries, and just an hour before it was published, she announced that she was stepping down with immediate effect as an MP. In a statement on Twitter, she said it had been an honour to serve her constituency of mid-Bedfordshire, but it was time for someone younger to take the reins. French President Emmanuel Macron has been to the town of Annecy a day after a knife attack took place in a playground there. Earlier, he met victims of the attack being treated in hospital, including an injured British girl. 3-year-old Etty was one of 4 toddlers stabbed. She's now said to be in a stable condition. The city's mayor says he's confident about the condition of the other 3 people. 2 adults were also injured. The knifeman, a Syrian refugee, had been denied asylum in the country just days before that attack. The Prime Minister says he wants the north of England to be at the heart of economic growth in the country. Addressing the Northern Research Group conference in Doncaster, Rishi Sunak said there's no route to success at the next election without the north. He also took aim at Sir Keir Starmer, warning that a Labour government under, as he put it, Sir Softy, would be a disaster.
We've averted the predicted recession, but my ambition goes far beyond that. We need to grow the economy, and I want the North to be at the heart of our economic growth. We will use our post-Brexit freedoms to create the most pro-innovation and pro-enterprise regulatory system on earth.
And finally, 2 lawyers defending Donald Trump have resigned after the former US president was indicted on charges of retaining classified documents at his Florida estate. This is the second time that Donald Trump has been indicted. He's the first former US president to face criminal charges on a federal level. Posting on Truth Social, Trump has accused the government of election interference in his campaign to return to the White House in 2024. On TV, online, on DAB+ radio and on TuneIn too, this is GB News. Back now to Bev.
Good evening. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful Friday night. Now, let me start by showing you a short clip filmed, not by a journalist, don't be silly, they're busy talking about Amanda Holden's pink shorts, but by a mere civilian, which has caused a stir on social media. It's been watched over 750,000 times in the last couple of days. Take a look at this.
So you go into the local Aldi's, like this one, and you think, I'm going to go in here and buy some food so that I can feed myself. And then you approach the barrier and look, you can't even get in the shop without having a QR code to scan here or to scan here, and then you can go in and buy things. Now this looks to me like the beginning stages of the digital prison that we keep talking about.
He's right. We are at the beginning of an industrial revolution, the effects of which will make the steam engine look trivial. In order to empty that Aldi and satisfy the most basic human need of eating and drinking, you must have a smartphone, enough battery to last the trip, enough memory to upload a new app, you'll have to fill that app with all your personal details, phone number, email, home address, payment card details, etc. Congratulations, you've just given the store 10 minutes of your time and handed over all of that data to yet another corporation who are likely to bombard you with offers. You can now enter through the aggressive looking glass barriers. And yes, they are meant to be providing you with a service. Aldi's website explains that when buying goods, you are helped, which is so kind, by secret cameras who will tot up your purchases as you go. Want to buy alcohol, but you aren't 18? That's okay. Just tell the app that you are, with a picture of your face. Want to pass an item to a person in a wheelchair or the little old lady who can't reach the ketchup? It's a bit awkward, but you're going to have to place that on a lower shelf first so the camera doesn't charge you. Random acts of human kindness won't be welcome in this rigid computer says no world. And then, when you leave, your bank account will be charged and you haven't had to endure interacting with a single human being. No more chatting about the weather with the lovely pensioner on the till. You can leave with your human interactions until you get home and put on your AI headset. If you don't like interacting with humans, and let's be honest, many of the techno-mega brains who think this stuff up are disproportionately represented on spectrums which find real-life relationships difficult, then this story is great news. But the young, awkward teenagers who prefer grunting to speaking must develop social skills so they can learn empathy and exist in healthy relationships. Anyone thought about that? Older people require social contact to avoid isolation and depression. For some, that job on the till is literally the difference between a happy life and a hastened death. Shops like these require fewer employees, although as anyone who uses a self-service till knows, the ones who do remain spend all day addressing sighing customers and unexpected items in the bagging area. The process is slower and more infuriating for everyone. And as we know, tech is not foolproof. So what if you get home and Aldi has accidentally charged you for something you didn't pick up? Well, even if you work that out yourself, are you going to go through the rigmarole of returning to the shop, complaining, and sitting through the video of you perusing the tomatoes? I think not. These shops will profit from our tech exhaustion. This relentless march of social change should terrify us all. It is leading, no exaggeration, to a digital tyranny, a world in which we can't function without jumping through surveillance hoops and meeting the demands of faceless corporations racking up profit at our expense. Masks in public, leaving your house once a day, and digital vaccine passports were merely the trial. Governments and private firms wanted to see what you would tolerate. We are being primed, we were being primed for the advent of the dehumanised world, a top-down system in which we plebs have a choice of 33 coffees but no actual financial freedom of how to make simple purchases. So what do? We rebel. We shame these businesses who are not acting with customer well-being in mind. We ask that they open the barriers to let us through without the app, quite literally. We challenge their visions of the future. We talk to our kids about the pitfalls of this bit-by-bit erosion of free choice. We wake up to the trials of universal basic income, which are currently happening in Wales and England. Even Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham, a northern man who one might think remembers what happened to communities where mines closed, says the time has come for UBI. We'll put a solid foundation, he says, beneath everybody so that they can have a life with security and stop worrying about everything, he said. Fine, sounds lovely. But what of work, purpose, a reason to get out of bed in the morning, and the satisfaction of earning a wage? You might see just a turnstile in Aldi, a mere inconvenience on your way to collect your tea. I see a doorway into a future of depressed, dissatisfied people with no jobs to do, taking handouts from the state, who will need to take more of your money to spend through tax, all because large companies are currently replacing people with apps and hoping we don't notice. Right. So tonight I'm asking you, is technology making your life easier or harder? I might be wrong. I might be. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email, or tweet us at gbnews. So what happens if you don't want to be ruled by apps, QR codes, scan in, scan out, monitor every second you browse the world? Well, joining me to discuss this is futurist Steve Wells, who has a particular interest in anticipating these disruptive technologies and how they might mould our experiences. Good evening to you, Steve. Thank you so much for joining me. I do think it's a fascinating topic. I've made it very clear my position on this, that yes, there might be some advantages, but the advantages don't appear to be for the customer. They appear to be for the corporation. Am I wrong?
Well, first of all, good evening, Bev. Thanks for having me. It was quite a dystopian perspective, I think, a dystopian picture that you painted there. I see something that's potentially quite different. And let's remember what we're seeing at the moment is the result of a raft of different trends. And a lot of those trends have been in train for tens of years. So a lot of this stuff shouldn't really come as that much of a surprise. I mean, these grab and go store technologies, they have been around for some time. Amazon have now got 20 stores in the UK. Aldi have that one. Morrison's, Tesco's and Sainsbury's are all testing stores. But, you know, it's such it's a tiny part of the marketplace. And as consumers, we all have the power in our hands to choose where to shop. And I think ultimately that's what we'll see. Some people will really like these retail experiences. People are already perhaps of a certain age, perhaps also of a certain disposable income, because I think one of the important things that we do need to realize as a society is that these kind of technologies and the way that they're deployed do risk social exclusion. So we do need to have that in mind. But, you know, the question is it the remit of corporations with shareholders to actually make that call? Or is it the call of government to develop strategy and policy to actually make sure that social exclusion is minimised as far as possible?
I don't think either of them care, though, Steve. I don't get the impression that neither the government nor the corporations care about social exclusion. There's no profit in worrying about a pensioner who doesn't have anyone to talk to in the day. There's no profit in you know, my dad, my amazing 86-year-old dad, he wouldn't be able to shop in this shop. He doesn't have a smartphone. And he, luckily, has my mum to do things for him. She would probably be the one arguing at the turnstile saying, let me in anyway, I'm going to give you some cash. But they're unusual. And I really genuinely worry about this rate of change. I mean, you say it's been going on for a while. I completely disagree. So Amazon has got 15 stores now in Ealing. The first one was only last March. They're going to have 260 of these by 2025. This is the very first one from Aldi, the one that we saw there. It's in Greenwich in London. Yeah. And I don't believe, Steve, that it's what the customer wants. That's what worries me. I feel like these conversations are being had in boardrooms about how much more profitable this will be and how exciting it is, but I don't believe it's what the consumer desires. Where are they getting the idea from that we want this?
OK, so there are a number of things I think to unpack there. I mean, first of all, there are a group of consumers that really like the technology, that really value the convenience, the fact that they don't, once they've subscribed to the store's app, that they don't have to worry about going through a checkout. There are another group of consumers that I think you're absolutely right about. They're not necessarily being spoken to decide what they want, but there is choice. There is still choice. There will be choice for an extraordinary number of years. Now, if we roll forward...
There isn't choice if I want to go into that Aldi. I love a budget supermarket. I love Aldi. I love Lidl. I want to shop. I do shop there. But I don't have the choice to go into that shop unless I subscribe to their digital tyranny.
So go to a different store. I want
to go to that store.
I do not buy the argument that there is not enough alternatives. Right now, this technology and the deployment of these technologies are in their infancy. So there's lots and lots of opportunities for us to shop elsewhere. I do think there's an issue about how are these decisions arrived at. There isn't a real benefit to enterprises, to corporations, almost in any sector, to do anything other than automate, because automation tends to be cheaper than people. And I think you raised a really interesting point earlier on when you said, well, what about universal basic income? What about some of these other things? How do we actually ensure that people continue to live fulfilling lives? And actually, that's the real debate here, because what we won't do, and what it's not right to do, I don't think, is stop the development of the technology. The right thing to do is to understand what the implication is and what as a society we should do about it. Because if we didn't take that approach to technology, then we'd all be riding around on horses rather than in cars.
But I think we're doing that back to front, Steve. I think we need to have the conversations now. And I want these corporations. Rishi Sunak is in America this week with Biden, and he wants us to be the centre for legislation and framework around AI. And he said, I'm going to get all the bosses from the AI companies in one room together. I thought, oh, brilliant. Well, that's going to be an echo chamber of them all agreeing to keep the plebs where we belong, whilst they put all the regulation in place to make their businesses more profitable. Don't fill a room with that lot. Fill a room with that lot and me or other people who want to challenge the presumption that this is always good news.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree in terms of whether that's going to be an effective form of consultation, and perhaps some kind of citizen-wide consultation about what makes sense, what it is that we actually want. The issue here, though, is that you're still going to get a significant number of people, probably, I think, the majority, saying, yes, I like these technologies. These technologies will allow me to do so much more, make my life so much easier. And I think individuals, people, the population probably don't understand that there is this broader perspective here, which is the potential for these technologies to actually take jobs out of the marketplace. Now,
replace them with
what? Necessarily a bad thing. So
and
long as we
them
have
with what,
the societal and social structures to
but
allow people to live fulfilling lives. And that future may be out there. On the other hand, it might not, because these technologies might not be as pervasive as we imagine.
But you see, that should be, surely the conversation should start with that. Like, the question is, what is important in life? Human beings being purposeful, getting out of bed. I don't know whether you're familiar with the famous Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the triangle, okay? So what we need at the bottom is our shelter and our food. And then at the pinnacle of that is this sense of purpose. And what we're doing is, we're now saying the hierarchy of needs has to include apps. Like, the app is above the food and water. Arguably, the app is before the food and water, because you can't go in the supermarket unless you've got your app, and we are neglecting humanity.
No, this is where your dystopian perspective is creating completely false impression. Somebody needs to. I think it's a great debate to have, but we need to be really careful that we put the right balance in place, because these technologies aren't stopping anyone anywhere in the country from having what we might think of as a normal shopping experience.
Yes.
What they're doing is they're testing the validity of the technology to make sure that it can do what it's supposed to do. The chances are it can. So what we then need to do, if we broaden the debate out, is say, so how do we transition from what we might think of as a society characterized by personal interactions to one where a lot of society is characterized by digital interactions? And what is it we need to put in place to ensure that we continue to survive and thrive as people? And that may be that if we do have, and I'm going to jump ahead now to this idea of universal basic income, but if we do end up with universal basic income because artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, and these other really smart technologies are able to do the jobs that we were traditionally able to do, it might be that we need these structures provided by the public sector that allow us to live fulfilling lives. Because whatever a lot of people say, most of our fulfillment is associated with work. So we do need to replace that. It's a great debate, but we need to be really careful
that we don't create
an unrealistically dystopian view of the future.
What you have just described, Steve, is communism. What you've just described is a future in which nobody works and everyone gets the same amount of money from the government. Don't aspire to anything. Don't compete. Don't try and fulfill your potential. Sit at home with your AI headset, playing on your tech, and the government will give you £1,600. I don't want to live in that world.
I disagree. That's communism. However, one of the things that if we project forward, we might see is something that's very different from the capitalism that's generated the wealth that a lot of people have been able to enjoy. So, if we use that universal basic income example, we don't yet know how that might be funded. We don't yet know what the transition of enterprise will be in terms of its ability to create funding through the public purse in order to pay for that. If that's the case, then actually you don't raise more tax by taxing people, because the people will be paid through universal basic income. So the tax burden falls on enterprise. Now, perhaps what you do then is you change the nature of the tax system. And what you do is you tax those enterprises that focus on automation, and you give the benefit to those companies that employ people. So you kind of shift where the tax is made. What you then do is you begin to say, well, what is it that the public sector, the public services should include? Should it be free banking? Should it be free public transport? Should it be free access to Wi-Fi? So we start to look at the kind of services that people will value when you put those in place. Not only that, maybe you replace what we think of as work by some form of community service. Now, that's just one idea that we do. And we have to be careful what we do. We still have to give people choice. I'm not suggesting that any of these things eliminate the need for choice, but we shouldn't just kind of hide our head in the sand and say, oh, this is all awful, without actually looking at what the future might be, what the choices might be, and what the range of different social solutions might be, even within the context of a very highly digitized world. Because actually, we don't know. And that's why debates like this are useful. Because
but don't you think,
and honestly,
Steve, I could talk to you all night.
About it.
I could talk to you all night. We might have to carry this on over a couple of bottles of wine, one night, you and I. But the thing that I feel I'm actually more worried having spoken to you rather than less, because the image of the world. You think my world is dystopian? Your world is dystopian, in which people do community service and get paid by the government. It's never going to work. It's not factoring in. I tell you what, I've got 2 teenagers, nearly 3 teenagers in my house. They would love the government to give them 1,600 quid to do absolutely every month, to do absolutely nothing, and then tell them to go and pick litter a couple of times a week. You know what? They'll be depressed. They'll be isolated. They'll be unfit. They'll be demotivated. They will lack intelligence. They will lack initiative. And I'm going to blame you when it happens. But Steve, it's been a joy. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for filling us in on. I mean, look, we got a statement from Aldi. Let me know what you think, won't you? Aldi have said, to be clear, I like that as a start of a statement. Our Shop and Go trial store opened 18 months ago and has had overwhelmingly positive feedback from customers. Not if you look on Twitter today. They also say we have no plans to roll it out further at this stage. Wonder why. It also employs around the same number of people as a standard store. Well, it might for now, because lots of people will be mopping up the mess of your technological future, but watch this space. Right, thank you to futurist Steve Wells. You are watching and listening to GB News. Coming up, the Dorries departure. Nadine Dorries. I wasn't talking about Boris and calling him by his nickname. Dorries' departure. Is it exciting or just on brand for her? And where is your north-south divide? More of this with Fox. That's me, Bev Turner, back in 3.
On Mark Dolan tonight in My Big Opinion, this week's visit by Rishi Sunak to America proved once again that confused President Joe Biden has got to go. America deserves better. My Mark Meets guest is one of Britain's most successful entrepreneurs, the founder of Reebok Sportswear, Joe Foster. He tells his incredible story. In My Take at 10, my first reaction to Prince Harry's needless court case against our excellent newspaper industry. I'll be dealing with the world's least happy millionaire in no uncertain terms. Plus, have burglary and theft effectively been decriminalised? And should parents have the right to remove their children from controversial sex education classes? Plus, Dial Dolan, in which I'm taking your video calls, and my top pundits and tomorrow's papers. We're live from 8 till 11 on GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Grr, it's not Laurence Fox, it's me, Bev Turner. This evening, my panel are with me. Joining me is Lewis Oakley, co-host of the Bisexual Brunch podcast, and Tonna Tomlinson, writer. Did I call you? Did I get that right?
Connor Tomlinson,
What did
close.
I call you?
Tonna Tomlinson. No cigar.
Do you know what? I've not had much to eat today. It's been a very, very busy day. I was in the garden. I think somebody needs to bring me a snack. I can't even blame it on booze, although it's getting to that time, isn't it? Right, both of you, thank you so much for joining me. Lewis, can I ask you first of all, what's the Bisexual Brunch podcast?
Oh, it's a podcast that I was that we came up with because we couldn't get the media to talk about bisexuality. There's three of us. We, do an episode every 2 weeks, every month, and it's really great. It's a really interesting topic. I think everyone thinks, oh, LGBT, we know all about it, but actually, you kind of uncover a lot of stuff on the podcast.
Do you talk mainly about sexuality then, or is it just random stuff from a bisexual perspective?
Mainly about sexuality, mainly about LGBT, but also about relationships and kind of how they differ and kind of our perspective from dating people of different genders and then kind of looking at how other people have their
Amazing,
relationships.
right? So you have kind of come from the future, haven't you? Really? So
Maybe.
a little bit. Trust me, a few years ago we wouldn't be having this conversation. But what did you make of my chat there with Steve, the futurist? What did you make of it, Connor? Did you think...
I was screaming at the TV in the green room because the idea that this technology is not going to be used for exclusionary purposes is laughable. First of all, as you alluded to, Rishi Sunak is currently in the US chatting to President Biden, who probably doesn't know where he is, and he's saying, I'm going to make the UK the hub for setting AI policy. he has appointed the World Economic Forum as lead consultant. This is on the government website on AI policy. And the World Economic Forum have set up this thing called ESG in conjunction with most of the hedge funds that have a very large stake in most companies.
So ESG being environmental and social governance.
Yes.
Words that make my blood run cold.
Yeah, that's a corporate social credit score. And what they've done in their document Blueprint for a Digital Identity back in 2014, which the UK Cabinet Office actually consulted on, they set not only a corporate identity, but a consumer identity. So when you're on the balance sheet for a company's ESG score, either your consumer base is compliant with ESG, what they're posting on Twitter, whether or not they're buying from your store because you're donating to enough activist causes, that's either an asset or a liability for you to be subsidised. So what they're going to do is if you post the wrong thing on Twitter and that's synced to your digital ID, that's synced to your phone, sorry, we're not going to let you in the gate, can't buy your food.
Brilliant. It's also about the fact that a lot of the technologies which will be required to live in this digital world have been patented, funnily enough, by the massive corporations. And so those patents will not, so those products, those technologies will not be of use to a builder in Reading, because you won't have access to some of the technology. That's how this spins out, isn't it? More money going up top, top down, leadership, profit at the top, small businesses collapse.
Yeah, it's big data, and this is why Joe Biden in his AI Bill of Rights bill has appointed certain NGOs as the arbiters of what data will be fed into the algorithms which will eventually govern us. So they're just creating a permanent activist class that will then tell us exactly what we should buy and if we can buy it.
Lewis. Right. I don't know whether you're I don't know how much you're aware of all of that detail that Connor was talking about there.
Not all of that. He knows a bit more about it than I do. But look, all I can say is I don't think that you guys are completely wrong. I'm LGBT. I'm paranoid by nature of what could you use the app to do in the wrong person's hands. So it is a worry. I do also think it's a worry, as you were talking about before, about people's jobs. People just working in supermarkets. That's it. So I'm cautious about it, but I will say probably 30 years ago we'd have had this argument about a mobile phone, saying, oh no, keep it strapped to the wall. We don't want to be walking around with it. I know that there's a bit of a difference there, but I think, like it or not, this is going to happen. There's one of these by me. There's an Amazon one by me, and I was kind of like the video showed at the beginning, couldn't work out how to get in, but they will refine the process. This is going to happen, so we have to look at, OK, if it's going to happen, where do we draw the line?
Would you say, on a day-to-day basis, tech improvements are tech changes are making your life easier or harder?
That's a really tricky one.
And that's the root of it, right?
I mean, you know, do I give my daughter the iPad and it keeps her quiet while we're making the, you know, that's helpful. But then do I get dragged into Twitter streams and lose 2 hours at a time? It's not clear cut.
Do you drive?
No.
So if you're driving and you're parking your car, you can't put money in the meter anymore. It's excluding all sorts of, you know, particularly elderly people who want to use cash. Is it making your life easier, Connor?
I'd say it's making it more alienating, because this is the kind of managerial, technological future they're promising us. And this is something you hit upon in your monologue. We're going to have endless varieties of consumer goods, but no social mobility, no ability to have free choice. And what they're making it is so that you don't have to have any social obligations or reliances on each other in order to access all this material goods. There's no bonds of sentiment. There's no sources of meaning. And that's why my generation particularly, we've got more social media time than ever. We've got more material goods than ever, but we've got a ceiling over our head where we can't have a house and a family independently without a vast amount of wealth that we inherit. And putting it lightly, my generation is having far fewer relationships, intimate, than any other generation prior. That's what technology is doing to us. It's castrating us.
I don't know whether you saw Apple have introduced their new AI headset this week, which was greeted with kind of, generally excitement, predominantly. Right. And that's what I think is interesting. When these new products come online, when these new technological advances happen, this conversation is very much one-sided. The enthusiasm. So when I was talking to Steve, our futurist, just before, about what jobs will people do, no one can answer that for me. Community service, art, poetry.
We'll be on the Star Trek Enterprise, like travelling the galaxy. That's where we're going. Look at all the sci-fi stuff in the future. Yes, there are the dystopian nightmares, and I am worried that is the way we could go, but then we could be off on starships exploring eventually.
Well, I guess you could say you have a job that did not exist 10 years ago. If you're working as a podcaster, that's possibly the kind of work that would come under the banner of creative and technological and self-driven.
Yeah.
Self-published.
It's like anything. I don't think anything is good or bad. It is how it is used, right? So, yeah, I wouldn't be known 20 years ago, but, being able to, on the bisexual front as well, actually connect people that would have never been connected, never made it to the mainstream, that's been useful. So it's not clear-cut.
Right, let's move on a little bit. Let's just talk about Nadine Dorries, if we can. Now, of course, everybody has the right to change their mind, but Nadine Dorries this morning said she wasn't going to step down, and 4 hours later, she said she did. Now, of course, she wasn't in the honours list for Boris Johnson. Do you think that's what's behind this, Connor?
I would be surprised because she hasn't come out and said something against Boris, even though being a Boris loyalist. My frustration with Nadine Dorries is that, like many Conservative politicians, Labour has yet to be in government and therefore held to account, but they're allowed to fail upwards despite doing us a complete disservice during lockdown. And frankly, we've had the revelations from the Telegraph this week that Nadine Dorries' department, the Department for Media, Culture and Sport, under Oliver Dowden, was spying on critics of lockdown, people like Molly Kingsley of Us For Them. Yep. And when they asked Nadine Dorries, what was your role in this? She said, I don't really know what was going on in the meetings, I just sort of vaguely heard about it. So either she is so bad at her job, she didn't know what she was meant to be doing and can't remember, or she's just lying. So how is she allowed to have her own television show and essentially get off scot-free, just leave the government with a tiny little payoff and absolutely no scrutiny? I think it's a disgrace.
Do you think she's slightly thrown her toys out of her pram, Lewis? Is she
it
just
sounds like it does. I mean, I'd love to know what happened in those kind of 5 hours between I'm nailing myself to the floor to I'm off, I'm out of here. So something happened, but I don't know. I mean, the honours thing, did that just happen today? I mean, we've known about this for a while, that there was this list of honours.
Well,
is it a shock?
Right, because, of course, Boris Johnson's father...
Yeah.
Stanley Johnson has got an honour in Boris Johnson's resignation list, which it just beggars belief that you can give your own dad a gong on the way out.
Again, another person who has, should we say, a dangerous record of rhetoric. I was at a COP26 event and he finished the panel that he was chairing by saying that population control is a good idea to curb climate change. There's written a book about this. Excuse me if I don't think that man with his dark design should be given an honour. Again, people allowed to fail upwards. And the most funny one I saw, and I think this is correct, is that Boris Johnson's giving his hairdresser an OBE.
Well, I've not heard that one. David Cameron did give his hairdresser an OBE.
So I saw it on Twitter earlier as part of this honours list. I can be fact-checked if that's true. One, I'm shocked that Boris Johnson had a hairdresser.
I was going to say he did.
Clearly not doing that great a job. But also, why are we giving stylists royal honours? Really?
I want to know if the decorator got one. Remember the decorator?
Well, the designer. I think she did get one, didn't she?
Did she?
I have a feeling that she already had one. But I genuinely think that we should do away with any sort of gong for anybody that's worked on. I don't like the idea of prime ministers shoring up, currying favours with people under the cloak of secrecy and saying, do you know what, do this for us, because when I'm out the door, you're going to be, I'll look after you.
I think that's a terrible... It's how it's put into practice, right? I actually think MPs that have served getting to go onto the Lords and be kind of advisory, like, in practice, that should work, but it's not. It's all favours, it's all, as you say, failing upwards. So I get it in principle, but how it's being acted out is not
well,
working.
she's given Rishi Sunak a problem because there's going to be a by-election now in her constituency of Mid-Bedfordshire. It is a very safe Tory seat, but frankly, there's no such thing right now at the moment, is there? Right, gentlemen, thank you so much. You are watching and listening to GB News. Thank you for joining me. Still to come, Birmingham, Manchester and Peterborough. Are they in the north? We've got an interesting conversation about what makes you northern, what makes you southern, and it involves food. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Very good evening. Thank you for watching the telly on such a beautiful evening, or maybe you're listening to me on the radio in your garden with a beer. Either way, I am Bev Turner in for Laurence Fox this evening. Now, the famous North-South divide is back. Well, it never really went away, but there's a new North-South divide calculation, and it's in pasties. At least a number of them. Here is the map. Yes, more digital goblins. Right, so artificial intelligence has decided to divide the country based on the number of Greggs bakeries compared to Pret-a-Manger. Right, so the logic behind this, it sounds a bit crazy, but it sort of works, because what they're basically saying is that people who shop in Pret-a-Manger as well have slightly higher incomes, and Greggs is perhaps people of a lower socioeconomic group, blah, blah, blah. So it is about social class, but it's very much north-south divide. Now, Connor, you drew your own map.
This was a while ago. It caused a little bit of stir, yeah.
So let's have a look at what you did. Talk me through this.
One, it was a bit of a wind-up, but two, I'm just going to commit to it for the bit. I think Luton and Milton Keynes are northern cities in character, so we're going to annex those, and then the south can still have Oxford, Cambridge and some of East Anglia. And East Anglia can kind of be its own thing, parallel to Wales, so it'd be like a nice little sister thing.
Right.
And then everyone else that doesn't like the south can band together.
So yours wasn't based on any sort of meat-based snack product?
Well, no, because theirs is rubbish, right? Because it has Swindon in the south, and that makes sense, but not for the reason they've put it there. Because I actually work in Swindon, and Swindon has multiple Greggs, but I've never seen a Pret. So, and Swindon is a Greggs town, not a Pret town. It's not very bougie, you know. It's very working class. So that just doesn't add up to me at all.
So basically, this was researchers at Sheffield Hallam University, and one particular speaker at the Cheltenham Science Festival, a woman called Sophie McLean, she referenced this on how maths is relevant to everyday questions, and she said, you know, you could imagine the single Pret in Newcastle surrounded by a swarm of Greggs, and in London they say you're never more than 6 metres from a rat or a Pret. Greggs is a symbol of the north because its first bakery was opened in Newcastle in 51, while Pret first opened in Hampstead in 1984. It's a bit tongue-in-cheek, this, isn't it, Lewis? But does it tell us something, do you think, about the differences between the north and the south?
Yeah, I think it does, you know. I mean, I grew up in the Midlands, and I didn't even know what Pret was until I, moved to London. So I think it is about sort of lifestyle, and as you say, that price point, although they're getting closer and closer now, aren't they, with those price points?
Yes.
But I think it is that thing. The sort of more north you go, the more Greggs you see, the more people that will go there. Whereas Pret is very a southern thing. So it actually does make sense. I just think there's a lot more to it than your Pret and your Greggs.
I think it's been blended though in recent years because O2 Priority now have free Greggs rather than, well, I think they used to do free Cafe Nero or things like that. So they're trying to bring Greggs more into the middle class consumer lifestyle of all the benefits by signing up to your phone thing.
Do you think there's this conversation about social class? Because I love this conversation. Being a born and bred Mancunian who's lived in London for nearly 25 years, even talk a bit posh now sometimes, you know, do you think that conversation is still valid? And how do you define where you sit socially? What metrics can we use to decide whether someone is working class, middle class, upper middle, higher? Where do you sit on that?
I think that it's been changed since around the mid-90s, particularly because of Tony Blair's focus on education, of where they send off loads of kids, no matter what their parents' social class was, to university institutions which fill their head with the same sort of stuff. It makes them more managerial rather than at a local level. And it's also been more atomised because most people will travel to London outside their hometown or one of the bigger cities, maybe Manchester or something like that, when they might have been in a more marginal town. And so you'll break up that continuity of your family living there. And most of the time, you're not doing it for very much anyway, because you're making ends meet. You're trying to earn as much as you can just to cling on to the high rent amount. So you're not really bringing much back home with you.
Yeah.
And so all of this focus on building immediate wealth when you're younger, getting more and more education, it's atomised local towns and communities and made everyone kind of the same. And so I think the big divide is between, do you value that pipeline from prolonging your education till your mid-20s, going to the city and trying to make something of yourself and actually coming back not owning much, or do you value the trades and practical wisdom that you talk about down the pub?
Lewis, would you say you're the same social class as your parents were?
Oh, I don't know. They watch this show, so I don't know what I want to say.
Are they posher than you or less posh?
Oh, no, I'm posher. But they will probably have a... But here's the thing. Their house is probably bigger than I would be able to afford here, so who's laughing now?
Why
you know what I mean?
Why are you posher than them?
They always say, what happened to you? You lost your accent and you got posh. Like... So that's the joke whenever I'm home.
Accent, where you shop, what you spend your money on, but ironically...
Apparently saying parents, so in a WhatsApp, I'm like, oh, I'm coming to my parents. They're like, don't call us your parents for your mum and your dad.
Oh,
there's words that they don't tolerate.
People my generation have a little bit of an American inflection as well. So they use random American words because they've spent so much time consuming American content, whether it be political or just idly scrolling on TikTok. They've imbibed that kind of universal accent.
Yeah, you're so right. In fact, there's a story in the paper today about the fact that the northern accent is disappearing. Hopefully not. Now, you are watching and listening to GB News. Next, I'm hearing from you as well. See you in a minute.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Thank you for joining me, Bev Turner, in for Laurence Fox tonight. Now, are you sick of people infantilising you and the nanny state telling you what to do? Here are some examples if you think I'm overreacting. So this was a picture of some tube steps that I took. And on the up plate of the steps, in case you're listening on the radio, it says, please use the lift. It tells you that 3 times. I don't know what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be losing weight. Oh, they've moved on before I could read it to you. And it says things like, don't rush, and it might be slippy. And here's a jar of peanut butter that says may contain nuts. Now, Lewis Oakley, can we talk about these one step at a time? Don't rush. Are we idiots?
We're not idiots, and I think guidance is fine. It's when it's mandated that it's the problem. But I will say this, there's all those signs that say do not take your prams on the lift, and I've got a double pram because our kids are quite small, and I'm like, oh, forget it. But actually, we almost all died, quite recently, because the wheel caught on the escalator as we were going up, and we all flew back. So I'm like, actually, you know what? Maybe some people do need the signs.
So we are all suffering because of people like you being too stupid not to take a double buggy on the escalator. Connor, we're looking at one now. This went out to farmers today from the government to say, with hot weather forecast, livestock keepers, farmers who've normally been doing it for generations, please continue to ensure the health of your animals by providing water and food.
Yeah, you would imagine that would be a sort
Obvious.
of obvious thing, but they don't trust our intelligence. One of the things that annoys me, I get about 6 trains a day just to get to work and back, and you hear multiple times throughout the journey, and I don't want to disparage the British Transport Police, I've actually been quite good in my interactions with them, but the see it, say it, sorted thing on it's encouraging a culture of snitching. and yes, the annoying thing as well is that, OK, I'm getting whiplash between they're infantilising us and treating us like kids, whereas actual crimes or people walking down the road and sitting in it, oh, you're allowed to do that with impunity. We don't actually sort out the criminal element that will hop those plastic turnstiles in Aldi. Yeah. But no, you've got to do it by the book and act like a child with your hand held by the government.
Yeah.
It's just a sticker. Don't read it.
But don't you think it sort of kind of develops inside of us, this idea that nobody should take responsibility for themselves? There's no sense of individuality.
But maybe it is. Maybe it's like, well, we told you.
I don't want to live in that world, though. I don't want to live in a world where do you know what it is as well? It's like it's litigation, isn't it? It's insurance and litigation. Because if you haven't warned somebody that the floor is slippy, and sometimes in the workplace, admittedly, that might be quite a good idea. But this idea that we can't think for ourselves and that we are complete idiots. So we've just all bought into it.
Also, if you can't socially correct for an error, that's the mad thing. It's like, so if someone slips up and falls over, you don't rush to help them. It's almost like, oh, you didn't read the sign, it's your own fault.
Yeah.
You're outsourcing any kind of community concern to, well, there's a bunch of signs there that tell you should have done otherwise, so, oh, well.
But are they not there because idiots like me did take their prams up the escalators? They're like, oh, you know what, let's put a sign on. Like, maybe it's the other way around. It's not that they think we're stupid, it's that people have been stupid.
Well, I have more faith in humanity than that. If anything's come out of tonight's show, hopefully it is that. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Lewis Oakley, Connor Tomlinson, for joining me. Up next, it is the wonderful, he was my TV husband for 2 days this week, Mark Dolan.
Evening, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. The weather's changing this weekend. Now, for most, it will stay dry with hazy sunshine, but it's going to be hotter. And that increased heat and humidity may spark some thunderstorms. Low pressure down to the southwest, just encouraging the winds to come up from the south, bringing with it warmer and more humid air. Hence why we have that thunderstorm risk. We could even see 1 or 2 tonight across the southwest of England, but for most it will be a dry night. That cloud just coming back inland over the Midlands, parts of northeast England and eastern Scotland, where it has been persistent for a long time now. Temperatures will drop down to single figures, particularly over the north in rural spots, but down to the south, staying in the teens. Quite a warm night, a sign of things to come, because that warm, more humid air is spreading further north, and with it, the risk of heavy showers. Most will have a dry, fine start to Saturday. The cloud should melt away from the Midlands, but may cling to the coast of northeast England and eastern Scotland. And then the showers break out. Hit and miss, not everywhere catching them, but where they do occur, they could be thundery. And they're being caused by this increase in temperature. We could touch 30 Celsius. It will be a much warmer